The werewolf that only hunts young boys after midnight? Asterisk, they called it coincidence at first. Then coincidence became a pattern. And the pattern became a warning no one wanted to believe. Every disappearance happened after midnight. Every victim was a man between 25 and 27, healthy, athletic, attractive. Men, in the prime of their lives, vanishing as if their youth itself had been torn from the world. No bodies were ever found, only bloodless clothes, and mirrors in nearby homes cracked from the inside. The elders whispered an old name. A creature that didn't eat flesh for hunger, but devoured youth to survive. This is the story they buried. This is the story that still hunts after midnight. Chapter 1. The first vanishing asterisk, Ethan Moore, was 26 years old. But everyone said he looked 20-1. He had the kind of face people stared at twice without realizing why. Sharp jawline, clear blue eyes, thick brown hair always falling perfectly out of place. His body was sculpted, not bulky, not thin. The kind of build earned through discipline, not vanity. A model's symmetry, a runner's strength, a swimmer's calm confidence. Ethan worked late. Always past midnight. That was the first mistake. On the night he vanished. The town clock had just struck 12:07 a.m. when Ethan stepped out of the gym. The parking lot was empty, too empty. Even the highway beyond the trees was silent, as if sound itself had chosen not to exist. He unlocked his car and paused. The air smelled wrong, not rot, not blood. Something older, like cold stone soaked in rain and fur warmed by breath. Ethan laughed under his breath, blaming exhaustion. That was the second mistake, as he sat inside the car. The rearview mirror fogged over, even though the engine hadn't started. A single word appeared in the condensation, written backward, as if from the other side of the glass. Y.U. Keithon wiped the mirror clean with his sleeve behind him. Something growled. Not loud, not threatening. Hungry, he turned slowly at the edge of the parking lot. Just beyond the reach of the light stood a figure far too tall to be human. Its legs bent the wrong way. Its shoulders scraped the fog. Yellow eyes burned like lanterns behind a skull stretched into a wolf's grin. The werewolf did not rush him, it circled. Ethan ran. His footsteps echoed too loudly, like the night wanted him heard. The gym doors were locked. His phone had no signal. When he looked back, the creature was closer, not running, not walking, gliding, as if the ground had given up resisting it. The werewolf spoke. Not with words, with memories. Ethan suddenly felt younger, 18, 16, 14. Every moment of strength and confidence replaying in his mind as if being counted. Measured? Weighed. The creature lunged. There was no scream, no blood, only silence and the soft sound of something drinking. At 6 a.m., Ethan's car was found untouched. His clothes were folded neatly on the back seat. No fingerprints. No struggle, only the mirror, cracked from the inside by morning. The town had already begun rewriting what happened to Ethan Moore, because that was what this place did best when fear threatened to surface. It softened the edges until nothing sharp remained. They said he'd moved away for work, said young men like him never stayed long. Said ambition had swallowed him whole, but the truth was written quietly in the details no one wanted to read. The gym owner noticed the locker Ethan used smelled faintly of wet fur. The night clerk at the gas station remembered seeing a tall silhouette pass beneath the security light without triggering the sensor. And Mrs. Calder from the apartment across the street swore she heard a sound at exactly 12:14 a.m., not a scream, but something like a deep exhale, as if the night itself had finally been satisfied. And when the local police reviewed the footage from nearby cameras, every recording glitched during the same 7-minute window. Frames skipping, faces blurring, Youth erased pixel by pixel, as though something had passed through the wires and fed there too. And then came the realization no one said out loud, but everyone felt settle in their bones. Ethan hadn't been killed. He had been consumed, not his body, not his blood. But the years that made him strong, the vitality that made strangers look twice. The invisible glow of being 26 and unaware that time was still something that could be stolen. And the elders, those who remembered the stories their grandparents told in whispers, understood the rule immediately. Because this wasn't a mindless beast. It was selective, disciplined, ancient. A werewolf that hunted after midnight, not for flesh, but for preservation. Feeding on men at the exact peak where youth begins to decline. When strength is fullest and fear is lowest, because fear spoiled the taste. And children were useless to it, too raw, too unfinished. And older men were brittle, already drained by years. So it waited patiently, night after night, for the perfect age to step into the dark alone. And as the days passed, strange changes followed Ethan's disappearance. The mirrors in town reflected people a second too slowly. Men complained of sudden exhaustion, as if something unseen had brushed past them. And dogs refused to go out after midnight, whining at empty streets. While deep in the forest beyond the highway, something tall and starving listened, counting down to the next full feeding, knowing the town would not stop it. Because admitting the truth would mean admitting they had always known. That this had happened before, decades ago. Every time the town grew too comfortable, every time young men flourished and believed the night belonged to them. The werewolf returned, not as a curse, but as a correction. And somewhere, written in an old ledger no one checked anymore, 4 names were already missing. All 25 to 27, all beautiful, all gone. And Ethan Moore was only the beginning. Asterisk, the second shadow appeared 3 nights after Ethan vanished. Not as a body or a sound, but as a change in behavior. A tightening of the air after midnight that only certain people felt. Men in their mid-20s who suddenly found sleep difficult. Who woke with the sense of being watched from inside their own rooms. And one of them was Lucas Hale, 25. A fitness model recently returned to town. Broad shoulders, sculpted arms. Brown hair kept deliberately messy, blue eyes that cameras loved. The kind of man strangers assumed was untouchable. And Lucas laughed when friends warned him not to go out late. Laughed even harder when someone mentioned Ethan. Because fear had no place in a body that strong, and on the night it happened. Lucas went for a run just after midnight, headphones in, breath steady. Moonlight coating his skin like silver paint, unaware that the werewolf was already pacing him from the tree line. Studying the rhythm of his heart, measuring the weight of his youth. And when Lucas slowed near the old pedestrian tunnel, the temperature dropped so fast his breath turned white. The music in his ears warped into a low, distorted hum. And suddenly he felt that sensation of being evaluated. Like standing before a mirror that could see past muscle and skin straight into the years beneath. And the tunnel lights flickered as the werewolf stepped forward. Taller than the archway, firm, matted, and dark. Spine cracking as it straightened. Its eyes fixed not on Lucas's body, but on his face. On the confidence written there, and Lucas tried to run, but the ground felt soft. Resisting him, every step heavier than the last. As if the earth itself was helping the hunt. And when the creature reached him, it didn't tear, didn't claw. It pressed its forehead against Lucas's chest. Inhaled deeply, and Lucas felt something leave him. Felt memories rush out like breath in winter. His first victory, his first kiss. The certainty that life was long and generous, all siphoned away in seconds. His reflection in the tunnel, glass aging rapidly. Lines appearing that had never been earned, hair dulling, eyes clouding, until the werewolf pulled back, satisfied. And Lucas collapsed soundlessly, not dead, but emptied. A shell the night had finished with, and by morning, Joggers found nothing but his shoes neatly placed beside the tunnel wall, laces tied, as if someone had taken great care to leave proof that the hunt had been deliberate, controlled, and far from finished. Chapter 2. The second feeding asterisk. By the time Noah Reeves turned 27, he had learned to recognize when people were looking at him, not with admiration, but with quiet envy. Because Noah carried his youth the way some men carried wealth, effortlessly and without fear of losing it, his body lean and well-defined from years of swimming. His brown hair always damp-looking, as if he'd just stepped out of water. His blue eyes calm, observant, the eyes of someone who believed the world was still fair. And Noah noticed the moon the night it began following him, because it reflected too clearly in every surface. In windows, in puddles, even in his phone screen when it was turned off. And after Ethan and Lucas, the town had grown cautious in ways it refused to admit. Bars closed earlier, streets emptied faster. But Noah worked nights at the aquatic center. And water had always made him feel safe, insulated from whatever lurked on land. Yet at exactly 12:11 a.m., as he locked the building and stepped into the damp parking lot, he felt the pressure of being observed. Not watched like prey, but studied like a resource. And the smell returned: cold rain, wet fur, ancient breath, and Noah realized the moonlight was wrong. Bending inward instead of falling straight, converging on him as if he were the center of the night itself. And when he started his car, the engine stalled. Lights flickering as something tall passed between him and the moon, stretching impossibly long across the asphalt. And the werewolf revealed itself slowly this time, emerging into full view, fur slick as if recently fed, chest rising and falling with deliberate control. Its eyes not wild, but focused, intelligent, calculating. And Noah felt the sudden certainty that this thing had rules, that it chose carefully, that survival for it was not about violence, but balance. And when he tried to run, the door would not open. Metal groaning as if held shut by unseen hands, while the werewolf spoke without sound, pressing images directly into Noah's mind, faces of other men, beautiful and empty, mirrors cracking, clock stopping just after midnight. Noah understood in that instant that the creature did not eat bodies because bodies decayed. But youth endured. Youth could be stored, transferred, hoarded. And when the werewolf reached him, it placed a clawed hand against Noah's throat, not tightening, not crushing, just holding him still while it inhaled deeply. And Noah felt himself thinning from the inside. Strength draining not painfully, but intimately, as if being remembered by something else and forgotten by the world. His muscles weakening, his skin losing its glow, the future shrinking rapidly. And when it was done, the werewolf stepped back, leaving Noah alive but hollowed, aging him years in seconds. And as the creature vanished into the trees, Noah collapsed beside his car, staring up at the moon with eyes that suddenly knew regret. And by dawn, his body was found slumped peacefully against the driver's door. No wounds, no blood, only a face that looked decades older than it should have. And from that moment on, the town could no longer pretend the disappearances were accidents, because this time, the victim had survived long enough to prove that something was not killing young men, it was harvesting them. Asterisk, after Noah Reeves was found alive, but aged beyond recognition, the town crossed a line it could never return from, because survival made the truth undeniable. And whispers hardened into rules, spoken quietly between men who suddenly checked their reflections too often. Never going out alone after midnight. Never walking where moonlight pooled unnaturally. Yet the werewolf adjusted. Because it always did, learning from each hunt, refining its patience, and the next victim. Adrian Cole, 26, personal trainer. Fashion campaign beautiful with a disciplined frame. Brown hair kept short and deliberate, blue eyes sharp with ambition. Believed rules applied to other people, not him. And when friends warned him about the moon, He smiled the way confident men do when they assume fear is weakness, choosing to walk home instead of calling a ride, choosing the longer path near the river where the night felt open and honest, unaware that openness was exactly what the creature preferred. And as Adrian crossed the footbridge just after 12:20 a.m., the sound of water slowed, not stopped, but stretched, each ripple echoing too long, and the werewolf emerged from beneath the bridge supports, climbing upward with unsettling calm. Its form illuminated fully for the first time, tall, scarred, fur threaded with silver streaks that looked like stolen years woven into its hide. And Adrian froze, not because he was afraid, but because the creature looked at him with something closer to recognition, as if Adrian reminded it of what it once had been. And this time, the werewolf did not feed quickly. It circled, letting the moon do its work, forcing Adrian to watch his own reflection in the black water below as subtle changes began. Shoulders sagging, skin dulling. That vibrant edge of confidence bleeding away second by second, and Adrian screamed, not in pain, but in denial, because the creature wasn't killing him. It was revising him, editing his life down to something manageable. And when the feeding finished, the werewolf did something new. Something deliberate. It left Adrian standing there, alive, aged, conscious, forced to stumble back into town as proof. And Adrian made it 3 blocks before collapsing, his body unable to carry the sudden weight of years that did not belong to him. And when people found him at dawn, his eyes were open, staring, not pleading, not terrified, but ashamed, because he understood the rule too late. The werewolf did not hunt recklessly anymore. It was sending a message, teaching the town that avoidance would not save them, that the moon was not the trigger. Midnight was, and youth was currency. And as word spread, mirrors were covered, gyms closed early, and men between 25 and 27 began to feel like walking countdowns, because somewhere beyond the river, something old and patient was growing stronger, wearing stolen years like armor, preparing for its final harvest. The 4th man was marked long before he realized it, because the werewolf had begun choosing victims days in advance now, watching routines, memorizing confidence, tasting youth from a distance. And Caleb Ross, 27, freelance model and amateur boxer with a perfectly balanced physique. Brown hair kept long enough to fall into his eyes, blue eyes sharp and expressive, had unknowingly become its favorite observation. And Caleb felt it first, as luck, doors opening too easily, strangers complimenting him too intensely, mirrors reflecting him just a little too kindly. Until the night, the air grew heavy and familiar dread settled in his chest like a memory he couldn't place. And at 12:03 a.m., walking home from a late photo shoot, Caleb noticed his shadow was wrong, stretching forward instead of behind him, lengthening across the pavement until it split into 2 distinct shapes. One human, one unmistakably not. And when he stopped beneath a flickering street lamp, the second shadow detached itself, rising, thickening, fur bristling into shape as the werewolf stepped fully into the light, no longer hiding its size or intelligence, eyes glowing with recognition. Because Caleb wasn't just food, he was an investment. And the creature circled him slowly, savoring the moment, forcing Caleb to feel the invisible pressure of time collapsing, memories blurring, strength wavering, and Caleb fought back, not physically, but mentally, clinging to his sense of self, his youth, his body, refusing to let it be taken quietly. And that resistance angered the creature, not because it threatened the hunt, but because it reminded the werewolf of what it once was. And the feeding that followed was violent in its intimacy, the creature gripping Caleb by the shoulders, pressing its forehead to his, inhaling deeply as if drawing smoke from a flame. And Caleb felt years rip away from him in waves, muscles weakening, skin tightening unnaturally, the future shrinking with every breath the creature took, until the werewolf finally recoiled, snarling in frustration. Because something unexpected had happened, Caleb had not been fully drained. Not emptied, not erased, and the creature retreated abruptly into the darkness. Wounded not in body, but in certainty, leaving Caleb collapsed beneath the street lamp. Alive, shaking, aged, but not broken, and as sirens approached in the distance. Drawn by no call anyone could remember making. Caleb understood something crucial in the moments before consciousness slipped away. The werewolf could be resisted. Not by strength, not by weapons, but by awareness, by refusing to be alone. By turning the hunt into a confrontation. And far away, deep in the forest, the werewolf howled, not in rage, but in calculation, because the rules had changed again. And the fifth man, the one who would end it, had just learned how to survive long enough to fight back. Chapter 3. The Watcher *. The fifth man did not disappear because he refused to be predictable. And Daniel Crow, 26, forensic psychology, graduate with a well-built, disciplined body earned through obsessive night training. Brown hair kept neat, blue eyes alert and analytical. Had already noticed the pattern long before the town admitted one existed. Because Daniel studied behavior the way others studied faces. And after Ethan vanished, after Lucas was emptied, after Noah survived, aged and Adrian was sent back as a warning. Daniel stopped sleeping at night and started watching, mapping the exact minutes when the air changed. When streetlights flickered twice instead of once, when dogs went silent instead of barking. And he noticed something no one else had. Every encounter happened within a 7-minute window after midnight. Never before, never after. As if the creature needed the day to fully release its hold on the world before it could cross cleanly. And Daniel began walking those streets deliberately. Never alone, never careless, testing boundaries. Letting the moon see him without offering himself. And the werewolf noticed immediately, because Daniel did not carry his youth lightly. He guarded it, and that restraint made him interesting, dangerous even. And on the night, the creature finally showed itself to him. It did not attack. It followed, pacing Daniel from rooftop to alley, letting its presence be felt in reflections and peripheral shadows, testing whether this man would panic or flee. And Daniel didn't. He acknowledged it silently, adjusting his route, stepping into brighter spaces, forcing witnesses into existence, and the werewolf recoiled from that exposure, retreating just far enough to stay unseen. And in that retreat, Daniel understood the final rule: this creature thrived on isolation, on secrecy, on men who believed themselves invincible enough to walk alone. And so Daniel began planning not a fight, but a contradiction. A scenario where the werewolf's rules would collapse under observation. And as dawn broke, Daniel stood beneath the same street lamp where Caleb had fallen, feeling the night loosen its grip for the first time. Knowing the creature would return, knowing it would grow impatient. And knowing that patience, once broken, was the only weakness something this old could ever have. Daniel Crow understood that traps only worked when the hunter believed it was still in control. So he constructed his bait out of routine and restraint, presenting himself exactly as the creature preferred to see its prey visible. Alone and confident, yet never careless. And for 3 consecutive nights, he walked the same route after midnight. Past the closed gym, across the quiet footbridge. Beneath the street lamp where Caleb had fallen, his posture relaxed, his pace steady. His well-built frame outlined by moonlight in a way that made youth appear effortless. And the werewolf followed every night without feeding, growing curious, irritated. Because Daniel did not panic, did not quicken his step, did not offer the delicious spike of fear that sweetened the harvest. And on the 4th night, Daniel altered a single variable, turning down the old service road that cut toward the quarry. A place abandoned enough to satisfy the creature's need for secrecy, but open enough to betray it. And as Daniel walked, he felt the night compress around him. The familiar scent of wet fur thickening, the soundscape narrowing until even his own breathing felt too loud. And when the werewolf finally revealed itself, it did so openly, stepping into the moonlight with an authority born of years without resistance. Towering and scarred, its fur threaded with silvered age, its eyes calculating as they traced Daniel's body. Assessing yield, and Daniel stopped, not running, not challenging, simply standing where the moon could see them both. And the creature hesitated because hesitation was new to it. And in that pause, Daniel spoke for the first time. Not shouting, not pleading, but naming the pattern aloud midnight. 7 minutes, men at their peak. Isolation as consent, and the werewolf reacted with a low, warning growl, not because it was threatened, but because being understood felt like exposure. And when it lunged, Daniel did not flee. He stepped backward into a flood of light as motion sensors ignited around the quarry's edge, illuminating the space with harsh white glare. Cameras clicking to life, radios crackling as voices filled the air. And the werewolf recoiled instinctively, its form blurring at the edges as if light itself burned it. Because the trap was never about weapons, it was about witnesses. And Daniel watched as the creature retreated into shadow, wounded by attention, by proof, by the realization that secrecy, the true source of its power, was collapsing. And as dawn threatened the horizon, Daniel knew the next encounter would not be cautious. Because a patient predator deprived of its silence always chooses desperation next. The werewolf's retreat was short-lived. Because desperation stripped patience from its ancient heart. And it struck back under the cloak of the next full moon, moving faster, sharper. Hunting with a fury born from losing control, and Daniel Crow, now marked not by youth alone, but by defiance, became the focus of its fury. Yet this time, the werewolf was not satisfied with draining years, wanted to break the man who dared resist, to punish the hope that had begun to spread among the town's young men. And as Daniel prepared for the inevitable confrontation, setting traps of light and witnesses, he realized the werewolf's true hunger was not simply to survive, but to erase the idea of survival itself, to devour not only bodies, but wills. And when it finally lunged at Daniel beneath the fractured sky, claws tearing through air thick with fear, Daniel was ready not with weapons, but with understanding. And as the creature's jaws closed inches from his throat, the surrounding floodlights blazed to life, cameras capturing every detail. Townsfolk rushing from hiding spots to witness the end of a reign. And in the sudden exposure, the werewolf faltered, its form shrinking, the stolen years bleeding back into the air. A howl of fury and pain echoing through the trees as it stumbled into a trap laid long ago. Not by steel, but by the collective gaze of those who refused to be silent. And in that moment, Daniel saw not a monster, but a fractured curse. And as dawn broke, the werewolf collapsed. Not dead, but broken, and Daniel stood victorious. The last young man hunted, the first to fight back. And the town would never forget the night the shadow was caught and the youth reclaimed. Chapter 4. The Aftermath *, after the werewolf's staggering defeat beneath the floodlights. The town exhaled, but peace proved as fragile as the cracked mirrors left in its wake. And while many believed the nightmare had ended with Daniel's victory, darkness has a way of lingering in corners, waiting for wounds to scab before it creeps back. And the next victim, Elias Grant, 26. A confident photographer with a strong, lean build, brown hair falling just past his ears, piercing blue eyes that caught light like shards of ice, returned home late from a gallery opening with the taste of hope still fresh in his mind, unaware that the creature's broken howl echoed like a promise carried on the wind. And though the werewolf had been wounded, its hunger was eternal. And Elias felt it first as a shiver along his spine, a cold breath in the back of his neck as he crossed the threshold of his apartment after midnight. the familiar stench of ancient fur wrapping the night like a cloak. And mirrors across town seemed to tremble, their surfaces rippling as if reflecting something unseen. And Elias's phone buzzed with a message from Daniela, warning he chose to ignore, confident that the trap had been sprung too soon. And yet, the werewolf had adapted once again, learning to hunt in shadows, to strike without warning. And on that night, as Elias settled in front of his camera for a midnight shoot, preparing to capture the city's sleeping beauty, he became the prey for a creature that no longer needed to reveal itself fully. Its claws scraping closer, its hunger sharper. And as the moon slipped behind clouds, Elias's image froze in a shattered frame, his youth stolen quietly, leaving behind a hollow silhouette destined to become the final piece in a story. The town still hesitated to tell after Elias Grant's disappearance. The fragile calm that had settled over the town shattered like glass underfoot. Whispers turned to panic and doors locked earlier. But the werewolf no longer needed the cover of open streets or empty parks. It had learned to move silently through crowds, to feed without frenzy, selecting its prey with surgical precision. And as the nights grew longer and colder, every man between 25 and 27 became a shadow of suspicion and fear, including Owen Blake, 26, a personal trainer with a body carved from years of discipline. Brown hair cropped short, blue eyes steady, but haunted by a creeping sense of dread, who found himself waking in the dead of night with a pounding heart, senses sharpened like a hunted animal's, and despite every precaution, never alone. Never out after midnight, he couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching from the dark corners of the city, nor the sensation that his youth was slipping away in invisible threads. And one night, as Owen crossed the empty streets near the riverbank at exactly 12:05 a.m., the air thickened, the fog crawling at his feet like living fingers. And the werewolf emerged not to hunt, but to intimidate, its towering form melting in and out of shadow, yellow eyes locking onto Owen's with a predatory hunger. A silent warning that the rules had changed once more, that survival depended not just on avoidance, but on confrontation, and Owen ran. Not away, but toward the light of a nearby cafe still open. The noise and warmth a fragile shield against the creature's patience. But the hunt had become a game of endurance. And the werewolf, now desperate and adaptive, knew it only had to wait for a moment of weakness, a crack in the armor, because hunger was a master of persistence. And the city's youth trembled under the weight of a curse that fed not on flesh, but on time itself. The werewolf's howls replaced by silence, its kills marked not by blood, but by the slow, terrifying disappearance of what made a man whole. The werewolf's hunger grew louder in the silence of the night, desperation clawing at the edges of its ancient mind. And as the city held its breath beneath the full moon, the creature found its patience tested by a growing network of watchful eyes and unwilling victims. And Owen Blake, still trembling from his near encounter, joined forces with Daniel Crow and Caleb Ross, sharing fragmented knowledge and fragile hope, crafting a plan that would turn the hunt into a trap. Because they understood now that isolation was the werewolf's greatest weapon, and community its greatest threat. And on a night heavy with fog and moonlight, Owen became bait, walking the darkest path alone, muscles tense, heart pounding, every step measured, every shadow watched. While hidden watchers surrounded the forest's edge, cameras trained on the narrow path. Silence broken only by the faint crack of branches and the distant call of a lone owl. And when the werewolf appeared, towering and furious, eyes burning with stolen years, it lunged at Owen with feral speed, only to be caught in a web of light and sound as floodlights ignited. Alarms screamed, and a chorus of voices rose from the shadows, forcing the creature back with a howl that shook the trees. But in its fury, the werewolf made a fatal mistake, stumbling into a net woven with steel cables. the cold bite of metal against fur sparking rage and pain. And as it struggled, the hunters closed in. Not with weapons, but with resolve, surrounding the ancient beast that had haunted their nights and stolen their youth. And in that desperate moment, the werewolf's snarls faltered, replaced by a guttural cry that echoed through the forest. A sound not of victory, but of defeat, as the trap tightened. And the hunters waited for the curse to break. Chapter 5. The Final Hunt. The night was thick with tension, the forest holding its breath as the hunters closed in on the trapped werewolf. Its heavy breaths, ragged and furious, eyes burning with a mix of hatred and ancient pain. And Daniel Crow, still the youngest and strongest of the group, stepped forward with a resolve forged in months of fear and study. Knowing this was not just a fight for survival, but a battle to reclaim the stolen years of every young man the creature had hunted. And as the moon slipped behind fast-moving clouds, the werewolf's growls deepened into desperate snarls, its powerful limbs thrashing against the steel cables, sparks flying where claws scraped metal, while the hunters circled silently, weapons lowered, not out of mercy, but respect for the cursed being's fractured soul. And Daniel reached out, voice steady though heart pounding, speaking words not meant for human ears, but for the monster trapped between man and myth, promising release from hunger, release from endless hunting. And in that moment, the werewolf hesitated, caught between rage and exhaustion, and as Daniel tightened the noose of the trap, the creature lunged with one final surge of fury. But this time, the hunters were ready, their combined strength forcing it down. The silver glow of dawn creeping through the trees, washing over the beast's snarling face as it was finally subdued. And as silence fell, broken only by the slow, heavy breaths of the defeated, Daniel understood that this night marked the end, only of the werewolf's reign, but of a cycle of fear that had gripped the town for generations. And though the curse was broken, the echoes of stolen youth would linger forever in the cracked mirrors and whispered legends of those who survived as the first rays of dawn pierced through the canopy, casting trembling light on the defeated beast. Daniel Crow knelt beside the snarling werewolf, feeling the weight of centuries in its bloodied fur and the sorrow in its glowing eyes. And though its body thrashed weakly against the steel cables, a strange calm settled over the clearing, as if the ancient creature understood its time had come. And with a voice barely above a whisper, Daniel recited the old rites he had uncovered in dusty tomes and forgotten folklore, invoking the cycle to end, not with violence, but with release. And the werewolf's growls softened, becoming pained murmurs, its massive head lowering slowly as the stolen years it had consumed began to unravel like frayed threads of time. And around them, the watchers held their breath, watching as shadows faded from the creature's form, silver light weaving through its fur, healing and undoing the curse that had made it prey and predator both. And in that fragile moment between night and day, the werewolf's eyes locked with Daniel's, conveying not hatred, but gratitude. A final understanding shared between hunter and hunted. Before it collapsed peacefully, no longer a monster, but a broken soul freed at last. And as the sun climbed higher, the town awoke from its nightmare. The stolen youth returned to memories and whispers. And Daniel stood alone in the clearing, knowing that though the werewolf's hunger had ended, the scars it left behind would forever remind them of the price paid for silence and fear. The werewolf's curse broken and the stolen years finally returned. The town breathed a cautious sigh of relief, but scars run deeper than skin and shadows linger long after the sun rises. And Daniel Crow, hailed as a hero by some and a haunted man by others, knew that true peace was fragile, built on silence and vigilance rather than forgetting. Because every mirror still held a crack, every dark alley whispered warnings. And the young men who survived carried the weight of memories no one else could see, the nights spent waiting, watching and wondering if the shadow would return. the stolen youth that could never fully be reclaimed. And as the seasons turned, the story of the werewolf became legend. A cautionary tale told in hushed tones, a reminder that darkness feeds on fear and isolation, and that monsters are not always defeated by weapons, but by the courage to stand together in the light. And in the quiet moments before sleep, Daniel stared into the night sky, knowing that while this chapter had closed, the cycle of hunger and loss could begin again if the town forgot the lesson written in stolen years and broken shadows. Because some curses are patient and some monsters never truly die, they only wait.